It's 6:01 on Tuesday, July 13th, 2021, and I hereby call this recessed meeting of the City Council to order. Could you please bow your heads with invocation by Councilman Marr?
O Lord, bless this assembly, grant us your wisdom, give us right knowledge and judgment so that we can always work for the benefit of the citizens of Diamondhead. We ask you, Lord, to bless all those in need today and to give those who are in pain and hurt some healing and peace. And we ask you, Lord, to give all of Diamondhead your prosperity. Amen.
Amen. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mayor,
Here.
Councilmember Finley,
Here.
Councilmember Moran, Councilmember Shepherd,
Here.
Councilmember Clark,
Here.
Councilmember Marr.
Here.
Could I get someone to move to confirm or adjust agenda?
I move.
Motion made by Councilman Clark
Second.
to confirm agenda. Second made by Councilman Mayer. All in favor?
Aye.
Marr. Darn, I didn't even make it through the first 5 minutes. I deeply apologize. The next regularly scheduled meeting of the City Council will be held on Tuesday, July 20th, 2021 at 6 p.m. here in the City Council chambers. Aloha Diamondhead will be held Saturday, July 17th from 4 to 7. The Hancock County Animal Shelter will be hosting a rabies and microchip clinic on Saturday, July 17th, 2021 from 9 to 1 at City Hall. This is a great event, $5 for your rabies shot, $20 for microchip. You can't beat this, so please make plans to attend and let's get all these animals microchipped in the event that they get out. We also will be having the ward meeting on Saturday at 9 a.m. and it will be to discuss the budget. Next, we have Mr. Ben Benvenuti with Covington Engineers here to give us an update on Turnberry drainage and to talk a little bit about Aiki Kaliki.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Ben, let me just introduce. Obviously, at our last meeting, y'all asked for us to take action quickly on really the Comey Drive ditches in that area, as well as Aiki Kaliki, Amoka areas. Covington Engineers has been engaged on Turnberry Drive in that area for the drainage issues there, and running, what do you call it, H&H? And helping us guide us there. That falls, and so does Comey, all inside the sub-basin A for the drainage. So it's all flowing. Everything that they're currently working on is flowing downstream to these other areas that were impacted. So I talked to Ben the day after the meeting last week, and we've met again, and again talked this morning, but looking at the idea of expanding their analysis to the entire A sub-basin, to the areas that were really, if you look at the impact of where the cluster of homes that were impacted, were all on those ditches that are downstream from Turnberry. In addition to the Aiki Kaliki, which is just to the kind of northwest of that same area. And then I'll just kind of hand it over. That's why I've asked Ben to be here and have that discussion and then see if we want to present with a work assignment at the next council meeting for Sub-Basin A.
Thanks, Mike. Yes, and so the packet I gave you, the first one is, the first sheet is showing you the flooding, flood zones. Then it's showing you the red dots, and Mike had this map created. The red dots were the affected homes. The second map is something we pulled together, and it's a series of 5 maps. So again, this overlays your ditches and culverts from your GIS system, and then also overlays the stormwater watersheds that were completed in a previous study by Seymour. And so the first page is an overview. The next one, zoom in a little bit. Obviously, it's tough to read at this scale, but as you flip through the pages, you can see the addresses of the homes affected. And then finally, the last sheet is the master drainage plan north These are the watersheds identified in the Seymour report that was done a few years back. Mayor, just to give you a quick update on Turnberry, we're looking north of Turnberry Way. Obviously, we know we've got a water buildup problem at Turnberry Way, at the culvert of Turnberry Way, that then goes and crosses Turnberry Drive and enters the golf course. We've done a little work on the golf course side, and now we're looking upstream. And the idea is to, if there's an area we can get impoundment of that water and cut off a quarter to a fifth of the watershed that's moving downstream, capture that water during a rain event, similar to a subdivision that's put in now under your current stormwater rules. Let's
Right.
capture your existing drainage, bleed it off, and reduce that plug of water that's moving down during the storm event. And so that's what we're working on, that model now. We should have that report to you the first meeting in August.
Excellent, and that'll take as well Crooked Stick, because Turnberry, their
Yes,
rear
ma'am.
yards are almost in their homes. I mean, it gets up to their patios on Turnberry with the water coming in. Crooked Stick, there's like 10 homes. Their whole backyard just floods and stays wet. You can't do anything with it. So if we pulled all those off, get a ditch, put a retention, then release it, that'll make a big difference on what you're doing downstream as well.
Absolutely, because that's about 100 acres of that 435 acre watershed that goes downstream, ties into Montroy Creek, and then these new homes at Comey Drive and that quadrant that flooded this last storm, that's a tributary that ties into Montroy Creek as well. So if we can reduce that flooding on one of the tributaries, it'll provide additional flow there. And I don't know when your first meeting in August is. Our report will be due August 6th, so I don't know if that's right after or right before. I
It
just
is
want to
August
clarify that.
6th.
I'll try and get it before.
So can I ask you a question real quick?
Yes, sir.
So what you're talking about, will that reduce or ease some of the flooding that winds up on number 3 of the Cardinal right there, that's been infiltrating the back of some of the houses on Mahalahui? So that's south of where you're talking
Of Turnberry Drive.
Yes.
Yes, it will.
Okay.
Most definitely. And
He's-
so it,
Clarify, he said Cardinal 3 on Mahalahui. The ditch that flows from Turnberry hits Cardinal 4.
okay.
Okay.
So
So-
it's two different locations.
Yeah, so this is
Just wanna make
back
sure-
towards the tee box, that area right there. That's where some of that water's been ponding.
No, this is not impacting that.
Okay.
This is all
But-
in Drainage Basin A.
Yeah.
So you are correct with that. So Iona Street and this drainage map, I actually drew the drainage basin map, and it was like 13, 14 we worked on it. But we also did a project on Iona and in that area. All of that area is in Watershed A. So Mahawahuli and Iona, but we have Pickering looking at Iona. We do.
We do right now, but what we'll probably end up doing is gathering their data and shifting it, and does that work assignment this way.
Okay, that would make more sense if we did that, because then we have everything in Watershed A that needs to be
Correct.
looked at.
Excuse my newness, but explain to me the difference watersheds. What do they mean?
Essentially, if you, during a rain event, when that drop of water hits the ground, based on topography, this is the direction it's going to flow. So everything in green is watershed A. Watershed A, all that water collects through your conveyance system, either open ditches, creeks, or culverts, and ends up in Montroy Creek, which ultimately ends up into Rotten Bayou.
So, based upon this, with up to G watersheds, we have basically 7 or 8 different watersheds going in different directions when there's a rain event?
Yes, sir.
And is that based upon topography of the land, or?
Yes, sir.
And we have the topo map that goes under this. So there's another map that's just topo that might be good for the council to have. It's called Existing Conditions North, and it's topo. But then each of those watersheds are divided in subbasins, which makes it even more interesting. And we have a few subbasins that need immediate attention.
Right, and that's a good segue. I mean, the report that was done previously by Seymour is a great jumping off point, because it identifies your ultimate outfall. So for A, it's Montroy Creek that goes under Diamondhead Drive, under the bridge, and then out to Rotten Bayou. And so it identifies the capacity of that outfall, and the size of the watershed. But it didn't dive down deep enough. And what we're looking at now for watershed A is we're going to dive down and look at your conveyance within that watershed. Because obviously there are issues of conveyance. If it's open ditches are too small, or if you've got major culverts crossing roadways that are too small, then we've got to analyze those and find where those choke points are and either retain upstream or increase flow to get that water through faster. And so it's taking the next step of diving in. And really it's expanding on what was done previously and just starting to dive in and looking at your problem areas. And what we learned on June 19th is we have some serious issues we need to look at now. But then once we identify those, you've got other issues of roadway flooding, you've got yard flooding that hasn't turned into household flooding yet, but we can start being proactive and analyzing each watershed and build a master plan a little bit deeper for the entire city.
When you get your whole study done and all like that, will you be able to tell us what the maximum capacity rainfall that all of our systems can hold? So in other words, would it be 3 inches an hour that, our systems can hold, 4 inches and you're putting it at the pushing point, 5 and it's gonna overwhelm it
Yeah.
type of thing?
We can, but we need to be cautious because we run our model based off theoretical rainfall events. And to compare those to actual rainfall events, the distribution of that rain in the city may be different. But if you look at June 19th, that was, I believe, here I've got it in my notes actually. That was what we use in our modeling for a 100-year, 24-hour event is 11.7 inches over 24 hours. On June 19th, you had 11.83.
Wow.
So it would correlate closely to, but again, we just need to be cautious because the distribution may be different, but it correlates to a 100-year, 24-hour event that you experienced. And so, but yes, to answer your question, we'll run the scenario for a 2-year, a 10-year, a 20-year, a 50-year, and a 100-year. And then you've also got to take, this is what I call riverine or conveyance system rainwater flooding. You've got to look at coastal flooding as well. Your tailwater elevation, if you've got, with Claudette, we get 3 feet of storm surge or whatever that number was, that's putting additional water in your system and backing up water from the coastal side into your conveyance system. So the scenarios of what your tailwater elevation does also affects how you drain. So there'll be a scenario of, no storm surge, 100-year event. Storm surge of a 10-year event, which may bring in 6 feet of water, 100-year rain event, and run those analysis and see where your deficiencies are.
Because watershed A is greatly impacted tidally, and that's difficult for folks to understand. When the water's up, watershed A is trapped. There's no way to get it out.
And it's a long process, and it's not something that'll be completed overnight. A lot of times when cities take on a in-depth stormwater master plan, they'll do step 1. You've already done step 1. And then step 2 is starting to dig into your conveyance. But there's a lot of field work that goes into that. We need to know your drainage type, drainage culvert size, material types, slopes. We need your roadway elevations, because each roadway could considerably act as a dam, depending on your conveyance underneath it. Ditch crossings, what's your cross-section of your ditches, what's the capacity of your ditches. So there's a bunch of field work that'll be collected and then provided to the city, to Mr. Riso, and that can be uploaded into your GIS system. And so therefore, you have that database as a city and can manage that, and you'll know at any point if you've got, if we identify 25 culverts that are undersized and need to be replaced, as they get replaced, either by city staff or by contractors, you can go into your GIS and update the pipe that was put in, pipe size, slope, and then that just continues up to it's a working model for you.
We have in the GIS every culvert, located. So we had that. But in the areas that we have in specific problems, you're going to go back out and pick up topo and redo those.
Correct.
It's not going to be every culvert because we have.
I had not been able to identify maybe.
The culverts and ditch information, those layers,
Mm-hmm.
when I got here, the GIS system was unplugged and collecting dust downstairs. We have not been able to locate good files or layers
Okay, well,
for those two, and we've asked Mark Seymour, I had Bruce and all contact him, and we have not been able to get those layers.
okay, well, those layers actually came from, the county did, we did back in, I want to say 2012. Every single thing in the county was located, so,
And we have the locations, but did it have
oh, it had
size?
it did.
had
It had the
size and
size and the type.
Okay.
So it was all labeled. Every culvert in Diamondhead is a shape file with the size and the invert. And it was a county-wide project, and we had the water sewer as well in Diamondhead. Everything was located, fire hydrants, and the water sewer wanted all theirs removed. But the contours, the drainage, the culverts, all of that is with the tax office. They have all of that information in GIS currently, as far as type 2 and the ditches.
Yeah, that's great.
That's a big start, right?
It is. Yeah, so we'll work with Mike and contact the county and get that information. And obviously, since 2012, some things have been updated. So, you know, in this initial step where we do have homes that flooded, we'll go verify material size, type, and slope just to make sure. But that would be a huge labor saver there.
And I wish we could get that uploaded, because Holly spent 2 years updating every culvert we replaced and inverts. And we can't get that to come up?
We have searched our AJ files, I mean, I've had them on it, looking for it. I said, look for anything that says culverts, look for anything that says ditches.
Okay. We even had the photos put in. She was doing a good job with that. No?
It
Okay.
was
Okay.
a very good 2014 or so effort.
Mhm.
So that's my presentation. I just hit on one more time. I mean, anything we do at this point is building upon, and I think we're going to work with Mr. Riso, if you so choose, to identify what your deliverable wants to be, right? Because anything that we do or anyone else does within your city from a stormwater management side, we want it to be able to talk to each other. If that's Corps of Engineers modeling software, that's GIS database, we want to make sure we build the right, and we have the opportunity too, I think, in A, to set up that more in-depth model of what we want the city to look like.
We want all your data in shape files, so we don't have to go
Absolutely.
back and redo this, and we can plop it in, into our GIS. That's the first thing. The second thing is, you know, even in a format like we had this report, so we did the first report was to take the entire city and for the first time divide it up into basins. So that was the first thing, and all the basins were labeled, and then the sub-basins. Then the first study clearly went through and took Basin A, and it looked only at the outfall and to see if it was sized adequately. And I think we only had one area, and that was over on Diamondhead East. That outfall wasn't sized, but we redid that whole ditch, redid the culverts under the street, so now that outfall was sized correctly. But now we need to get it where we know, you know, we've had a lot of new homes built, so we've been making it. And if you remember, I was the only one that voted no on the Twin Lakes study, because I knew our retainage was already maxing out, and I could see it on Aiki and Kaliki. I saw that. And every new home that came up, and we changed the pervious to, you know, to impervious areas that we were using for storage. And you're going to see that on the contours. You know, we were using those lots for storage, and now they're gone. So
Absolutely.
that water is hitting the ditches now, because it's now, you know, it's now impervious and the water can't get out. So we need to know, we even need to look at the future. Because remember when you did the Twin Lakes study, we looked at, okay, if all the lots we have left were built out, and this went from pervious to impervious, you know, we wouldn't be able to accommodate. So we need to look at that as well on these studies. Drainage Basin A, if there's any lots left and those are built out, then what do we need this ditch to be? And what do we need to start? Because this affects the building department on setting the culvert sizes. You know,
Right.
we all like to use 15, kind of like back in the day in the 80s, 4-inch was typical for fire hydrants, you know, but things change, and we need to change.
No,
Those
and
are things that I'd like to see.
That's a very good point, and that's exactly what we did on Twin Lakes. That's what we did on Turnberry, and that's the biggest unknown right now in your case. If you have a developer come in the city, you have your stormwater ordinance, they have to capture and retain their stormwater. The problem is you've got thousands of lots that don't fall under the stormwater ordinance because they're already platted. And so when, as Mayor, as you pointed out, when they get built upon, they have no stormwater retention requirement, and it turns that lot into impervious area. And so the full build out will be a model, will be, you know, existing conditions and then future build out. And that's really where we're gonna identify areas maybe 2, 5, 10 years down the road that we can start planning for, budgeting, putting in a CIP program and implementing.
Right. And that's hard for people to understand. It's not the new 76-lot subdivision that we should all be fearing, because MDEQ mandates they're going to retain and they're going to run off at the same rate. You know, we know that they're going to have to do that. It's the single lots that are being built that we have no control over, and now they're changing, and it's changing the dynamics. You know, we were good with our detention ponds we currently had, but we're to a point now where we need more. It's quite obvious.
Can I ask us just what you were saying about the single lots and, you know, as they get built more and more, it becomes more of a problem because they don't have a stormwater runoff. Would something like the no-fill law, you know, would that help with that at all with runoff, or would that have no effect one way or the other?
It could help with storage, your storage capacity as a watershed or as a city, yes, because you're not bringing in new fill that then takes the place of existing storage. But it won't fix your problem, no. You'll need to, based on zoning and based on what house sizes are being built on lots, we'll have to make assumptions and consider that impervious.
It will help tremendously with the neighbors.
Yes, yeah, because then you're pushing water.
Yes,
next
because you're
door,
giving them the
absolutely.
water when you do that.
So
That's
stay
not,
on that property.
yeah, we need to stay on that.
And just, you know, real quickly, we've got, with the stormwater ordinance that we have in place, you know, the building official is armed with some tools right now to prevent some of this impact on neighbors. I mean, you know, the ordinance, you know, clearly states that you cannot have a negative impact on neighboring properties. So, you know, one of the things that Ron has done, you know, he's required, you're gonna have to put it on a chain wall, you're gonna have to elevate it, you're gonna have to, you know, things other than just loading, you know, yards and yards of clay on a lot that is, you know, U-shaped. And that's, you know, obviously it increases construction costs, it's gonna, you know, but it's going to be something that on some of these lots that have sat and they haven't been developable in the past, that are now, you know, because the market's the way it is, that are more attractive to builders. You know, Ron's got the tools with that stormwater ordinance to require you're not just gonna dump dirt on there, right? Now, whether we have that no net fill policy or not. So there's things in the stormwater ordinance that do help. That you know, like I said, there's an example I spoke with Ron just a few weeks ago, where he told the builder, "You're gonna have to do it on a chain wall," and the builder acquiesced and said, "Okay, if that's what it takes." So those are the types of things that the building official can do now to help those neighboring lots on those infill lots.
So how do we do follow-up on that? I mean, Ron can get out there and tell them one thing, and all of a sudden,
Oh, absolutely. That's and that's, you know, that's another aspect of it, that the building officials, you know, have got to have their eyes open and be looking. And when we do direct a builder to build in a certain way, or put, you know, silt fencing up, or not to put, you know, clay into the ditches, we've got to get out there and be more, you know, aggressive in enforcing those things. And it's a matter of just having eyes and ears on the ground. So, you know, as residents see these things, you know, and you guys probably are on the front lines of that. Residents probably call each of you first, direct them to call Stanley in Public Works, to call Ron, call Mike, put in, put in the complaint, and Ron, we've issued stop work orders until silt fences have been put up and things have been done. For example, if a builder, if Ron says, hey, you're putting it on a chain wall, and the next day there's a load of dirt out there, stop work order. I mean, it's, the stormwater ordinance that we've got in place has got a lot of teeth to it. It can be enforced to assist with some of this stuff.
Yeah, the building department does a good job as far as when you have milestone inspections for every phase of construction. They're very good about doing that. I think, I think Ron and them have lots of tools to do it. My question I wanted to ask is, do they have enough teeth to a lot that's currently a developable lot, but we know it's drainage, or it's a big part of drainage? Do we have the ability to say, no, we're not going to build on this lot?
If they don't if the builder can't give us an assurance that it's not going to negatively impact, the neighbors, then yeah. I mean, so, even steps of, we're going to require an engineer stamp on it to that you're not shedding water negatively, things of that nature. Mike and I, we've kind of debated in the past, this is a little, airing some conversations that we have, but one of the conversations we have is, look, does the city want to take a more active role and look at, acquiring some of these lots? Is that necessary versus just getting a little bit tougher with enforcement of some of the ordinances? Is that, so there's, and there may be, who knows, when Ben comes back and says, look, here's a plan, we've got an idea for some detention here, the city needs to acquire these 2, 3, 4 lots, then we go that route. If it's just a one-off lot that, doesn't have a lot of value, there's other things that the city can do to ensure that that lot's not going to negatively impact.
Yeah,
And go ahead.
go ahead.
To comment on that, we had that situation, I guess it was in Leala Place, we had that lot. It's a very similar situation where we tried to purchase the lot, we were denied. Now it's turned into a flooding hazard to
Yeah,
the
they built on
people that are
built on a
downstream,
chain
and then
wall,
they
and
turned
there's still a
around
stream of water flowing
and they turned
down the
around and
side of
told
it.
us, well, so why didn't you just buy it from the builder? So why didn't you just sell it to us in the first place? And they wanted to blame us all the way around when really we tried to do our part in initial. So are we taking steps now when we have a realtor or a real estate agency that refuses to sell it to us, and we know that this needs to be a green space?
I mean, the city ultimately has eminent domain if we want to acquire property.
I know in that situation we probably should have done that, but at the time I'm sure I don't know where the ball was dropped, but
Yeah, this is the one, we called it the Diamondhead Drive West Drainage Project. We had digital engineer work on it. We probably spent about 50 grand on drainage, putting some underground storage.
And what
And
that drainage was about, because I spent many, many days out there and many videotapes. We had Lala Way was draining the entire street through a residence yard, the entire street. I mean, it was coming, there was like a 10-foot elevation grade, so it was all rushing through the yard. I watched it move a trampoline and tear down a section of 8-foot wood privacy fence. So we went subsurface, and I think so far it's been,
I guess
it's been.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
We hadn't seen any flooding at that home anymore.
Well, my the back fence in that piece of property that we were trying, that's up the hill from it. I guess my point is, we need to use that as an example and a lesson from here on out, because that the homeowner, she has called and complained, her back fence has been destroyed left and right. So as we move into the future, that's a prime example of when we need to step in and make sure future reference.
Yeah, I mean, that house is up. The slope of the grade is
Yeah.
kind of like this on that property. The house is on a chain, so
Yeah.
really zero chance of
Them flooding, but
the house flooding.
it makes
But
the
it
water flows
has
faster
a nice
going
stream
downhill.
flowing from the street down, which I've seen video.
And I think what we have to just keep in our heads and think about this, because it's this simple. The stormwater management is a big thing, and we need to work harder at it. We do need to work hard. I mean, the city of Biloxi has a full-time silt fence man that goes around just checking on the silt fence. The building department does an outstanding job, and we're very fortunate to have them. But the most important thing is, you know, when we were designed and built out and we had the ditches and we had the detention areas, it wasn't, the calculations weren't to accommodate every single lot being built, and that's where we are today. Our impervious has changed so dramatically in the past 2 years. It's a new day. So you have a big job ahead of you, because the numbers are all different now. It's totally different. So the amount that we had going in the ditch on, and let's just take Iona, you know, or let's take Kaliki, because they had probably the most new homes being built, you know. So now the runoff is 5 times what it was 2 years ago, because the pervious area has changed. So even though the stormwater management was done and we followed all the rules, we're dumping a lot more water in the ditches. So we got to make sure that we've got the culverts to get out, and we've got to make sure the outfalls are cleaned out. And then you've got to make sure the sizes are right so that we can.
We will.
Yeah, and to just to clarify, so you did say that the study you guys are doing is to look at all the lots that can possibly be built out over the next 10 years or so. So we're doing a study so that our infrastructure so we can grow into the infrastructure instead of trying to catch the infrastructure up into
Absolutely. We want to be proactive instead of reactive. We want to identify a full build-out based on your current zoning, right? And that's the best we can do at this point. Your current zoning, full build-out. And Mayor, real quick, you're not alone. You're not the only city that's going through this. There's
No,
a
we're
lot
not.
of communities around that are having these issues. But Councilman Shepherd, if I can go back a minute, you talked about what we can do. You know, just looking at Basin A, and it is very important at looking at these homes that flooded with this rain event, because we want to address those first. But once this master plan is built out and modeled for your city, the city can then place standards and guidelines on how high you have to build. So you mentioned lots that may be low, that may be identified. So FEMA sets the flood maps, right? Well, FEMA doesn't look as deep of a dive as we're going to look here, right? They're more community-based, and they're more coastal, and they do have some riverine, but they may not have elevation standards throughout your city. But as we go in there and we identify, hey, on a 50-year or 100-year storm event, this lot's going to have 3 feet of water on it. Well, then you may want to say, okay, to build on this lot, you've got to be at elevation 42. I know the ground's at 36, and you can build at 36 right now, but you as a community can put that stricter rule to deter future building that you know is going to flood.
Well,
So when you talk about doing that, though, how does that impact the actual flow of water at that point? Because if on a 50-year event, you're looking at that much water in that piece of property. If we fill it, even though it'll be on a chain wall, we're still losing that amount of square footage right there, cubic,
Correct, but their
cubic feet
house.
of water.
Correct, but their house won't flood. It's just like if I was going to go build on the marsh, and I know on a coastal event, I may get 5 feet of water, and I'm on pilings. You know what? I'm going to have to pick everything up and put it on the porch. It's going to be the same thing. It's a deterrent for them to develop below what we know is a flooding stage. But our analysis will consider that lot built out.
Okay.
So we'll still consider it built out, and that's what'll give us those new elevations around your city.
Okay, great.
okay.
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, finish what you were
No,
gonna
I was
tell
just saying, and you may want to put a stipulation they can't do a chain wall, because you want flow through on it, and so you may be on stilts.
Yeah, when we get to a certain point, it has to be on piles. That's just how it is.
But that's where we want to get to. And again, it's I promise it's not going to happen overnight. We need to address these 50 homes from Claudette, and then move to the next phase, and over time build out a plan to where, I mean, you have the best stormwater plan in the on the coast, and you're then doing CIP plans for future development 2, 3, 4 years out. You're budgeting for drainage projects that you know are going to come on based on housing development in your community.
And I know this year's been crazy. I mean, we've already had a year's worth of rainfall
Right.
already halfway through the year, so that makes a big difference too. I understand that.
Yes, sir. I'm
You,
sorry.
you said your report was based upon our current building codes. We will have recommendations on how to make the best use of building codes going into the future. to manage water
Not-
runoff. So I'm just
Zoning-
thinking of one thing in particular is, if you have a 6,000 square foot lot, can you have enough land around it to soak up the rain if you build a 3,000 square foot home? You know,
Right.
things
Developable
like
area
that.
of your
So-
lots.
So
Absolutely.
what would be the ratio of actual, like she was saying, pervious to impervious on any one given lot? That would be optimum to reduce, you know, rain getting out of control in terms of our neighbors and
Right.
overflooding the ditches.
I was just going to comment that if I understood it right, what we did over by Twin Lakes was looking at the current zoning code. So is it R1, R2, R3, and looking at density compared to the actual building codes. If,
That's right.
He took,
I'm sorry.
he
Mary.
took the setbacks on the 6,000 square foot lot, and then he made a rectangle, and he said this all could be built out. Because, and within the setbacks, that's a building. But we could do things like making the driveways in certain areas be pervious, you know, not allow for asphalt if we know. There's things that you could do.
Low impact design, you're right.
Yes,
And, you know,
that
there
could be
incentive
tremendous.
Incentive programs
Incentives,
for,
yes.
you know, Mike brought that up recently, incentive programs for catching rainwater. So,
Exactly, some
yeah.
catchments.
How often will you have to redo this? I know that Elliott Homes will be putting in a large number of homes, and we have another one that just popped up on our radar, subdivision, and I know Kurtowski's putting another.
What he said a couple times so far, they're doing this as if Diamondhead were built out, period. Elliott Homes,
Okay.
all homes, every single one. So we're taking this to the end and coming back. Am I right?
Yes, sir. And Councilman Moore, we're going to look at if there's a large undeveloped plot of land that can be subdivided in an Elliott Homes subdivision or another subdivision in there, we're going to classify that as neutral.
Neutral.
Because, you know, based on your stormwater ordinance that you've adopted, they cannot, they can't release any more water than is currently leaving that site. And I know Mike and the building department are doing a great job on having engineers review the engineering reports from the developer. You know, I'm an engineer, but you always need somebody looking on the city's behalf at that report, you know, because it's not just about how much water, it's where's the water going. You know, if 90% of my water was draining to the east and 10% was to the west, I developed my property and now I've got 50% going to the west and 50 going to the east. Well, I just added more water to the west. And so you've got to look at that carefully.
You do, because even though the new developments are good in the aspect of retainage, and we have the area designed for the runoff to stay at the same rate, you know, it may have impacted the drainage around it, because certain areas, and it happened all over Diamondhead, you know, it was overflow on areas, and we used that for detention that was absorbed, and now that's gone, so that water has to find a place to go. And that, I think that's what we're seeing now. Well, an excellent report.
Okay.
We're excited, so
All
can
right,
you have
thank
it
you.
done next week?
I can work with Mr. Riso to get a scope of work. Yes, ma'am.
Well, thank you.
it's my intention to put a work assignment with Covington for Subbasin A and Aiki and Kaliki area on the next agenda. So that's what I'll be working with Ben on, finishing up this week. So when we put the agenda out by Friday, you'll see a work assignment directed towards that analysis.
So we're
we
gonna
discussed
have
today.
Turnberry and Crooked Stick, Comey Drive, Kaliki, Aiki, Amoka, Aiki, Kaliki is one, Comey, that area is one, Turnberry, Crooked Stick, and are you shifting over Mahawahuli and Iona?
That's my intention, yes. So
Okay.
everything in A would be looked at by Ben. We wouldn't do a separate, well, actually, we would create a separate work assignment for this work compared to what we're already engaged in with Turnberry. It's going to be included, I mean,
That's correct.
It's a
It's gonna
huge
be
equation
included.
piece, but it would not change that work assignment.
Right, because
Our
I'd like to.
discussion.
Correct, unless you so choose, but I think we can give you the deliverable on Turnberry. That way you can make a decision on where you want to go with that property. And then include that into this study. And we're going to look at A, obviously, because we have to model A, but we're going to focus in very specifically on the places you just mentioned, Mayor, that had flooding. And so that's where a lot of the field work is going to be verified, and we're going to look at A holistically.
Okay, because those are the areas that we need to really, really get done soon. And Makiki, we still have that being worked on with,
That's Pickering
Pickering.
Engineering on Makiki. I am actually getting right of entries from, I think, 4 property owners, talked to all of them.
to go dig.
Not a problem to actually take action. Ms. Bunter, and they had more water last week in their house than the other rain event. So I just told us, look, we're not gonna wait for the engineer report. We're gonna go ahead and put a mini excavator along the rear property line where we have a 20-foot drainage easement. And we're gonna create basically a 1-foot ditch, just so we can catch the water coming off of Lola and those vacant lots that don't flow into her backyard and then into her house. She's
But
been flooded
it's-
4 times this spring,
Mhm.
compared to never being really flooded.
And that's a perfect layout to do the ditch behind the homes, then it ties into the major outfall
Correct.
crossing under Makiki.
But I
But
spoke with her last week and just said, look, this is what I can do. So I've talked to the property owners today, started getting signatures, and we'll go in and basically just use a mini excavator and create basically a 1-foot ditch just to catch the water and then convey it down to the larger ditch that's already in existence. So that should hopefully prevent the next one. Then we'll just wait for the engineering to finish.
Yeah, because that catch basin needs to go away.
Mhm.
It's a big factor there as well. All right, well, thank
Question-
you.
got a question for Mike. We have people I have people asking me, they're talking about putting French drains in the yards and stuff like that. Should we be recommending that to them or letting them do what they want to do, or how should we advise them on that?
So French drains are allowed, and I'm not an expert on French drains. I'd refer to the mayor or Ben over here probably. But a lot of that French drain, tell me if I mean, y'all gonna know French drains better than me. If someone's just kind of catching some water that's going off or trying to catch it before it gets towards their house, I mean, it works. I mean, I've seen in my own personal experience, I think it works. Are you talking more of a landscape culvert compared to just some French
Man,
drain where?
I'm not sure what they're planning.
Okay.
I think I saw that. I think they're talking French drains, but French drains are not gonna send drainage away. It's really not. And I don't know how to nicely say that, but if you have an area that stays wet all the time, well, then you put in a French drain, but then it has to be put in right, because I saw someone working very hard putting one in, but they didn't do a rock base, had the sock on the pipe and the gravel over it, but then it was sitting, just sitting on dirt, just.
Or clay or.
Yes, yes. So we have to get an example of how to put one in if they're gonna do it, so that we know. Even we might have to start doing, permit. You don't want people spending money and it costs money. It does.
I don't want them messing up what we're trying to do.
Well, I think it goes back to what Derek was saying. If you do that, in some scenarios, if you're real wet up against your slab, you're going to want to move that water to the edges of your property. You just need to be careful. You're not taking that water and then putting it on your neighbor. And I think that's what you're going to run into. From a capacity standpoint, it's not really going to affect what we're looking at, because the water won't change, but the way it gets there may. And so I think that's the complaints you're going to see, is from a adjacent property owner whose neighbor just put in a French drain and now they're getting more water on their side.
And the other thing you'll see is, tubes attached to the gutter system, so that when that rainwater comes off the roof down the gutter, that it's sent to the ditch or sent away from the house. And that's again sending it further out.
That was customary years ago. It was like shh, shh, shh.
Share it with your neighbor.
Exactly.
We want the grass to soak up some of that water now. We don't want to just, we
Yeah,
don't want
we
pipes
do.
throughout the city. I
No,
promise
we
you that.
don't. That's where all those little 4-inch PVC sticking in the ditches are coming from. Well, thank you. This is
Thank y'all for your
exciting.
time. I
Thank you
appreciate it.
very much.
Thank you.
Mayor, if you don't mind, I will, on the map that I handed out to y'all, that you see the houses that took water throughout the city. And obviously, we have houses that are on pylons, that are on Rotten Bayou, Devil's Elbow. If you're on the south side, there's times you kind of expect water, and that's why you're elevated up on pylons. But the other ones that are throughout the house are pretty much on slab. I noticed another cluster in that Anahola Place area off of Diamondhead Drive East, which we're fully aware, and it's identified as a flood zone as well. We see the pink. There's 4 or 5 houses, all together. Otherwise, there's a lot of singles that are out there, like one house here, one house there. That's just what I see when I look at this. Mostly all of them, the big chunk is in A. And that's why I think that has to be a high priority, which the council has directed. But I just want to direct you again to that Anahola Place area where you see 4 or 5. I remember my first month on the job, we had a heavy rain, and there was a lady that put some picture on Facebook, and I sent her a private message and said, "Where are you?" But I see, again, that right there is another problem area that we probably, as we move forward, is going to be on our radar.
And you'll see it on the outer areas because the whole rest of the city drains to these areas. So A is getting a lot of water. All right.
And if any of y'all are interested, that map over there is the Seymour map that was done with the basins, and you can truly see how big Subbasin A is. I mean, it's the commercial area to Turnberry. It's a significant portion of the city.
All right. Did we have any public comments? City Clerk? No, we did not. Okay. Moving on to resolutions. Resolution 2021-235. Motion to adopt Resolution 2021-053, thereby authorizing grant application preparation and submittal to the U.S. Department of Transportation for the FY21 Rebuilding American Infrastructure and Sustainability and Equity Program, funding the Commercial District Transformation Project, committing local match funding, and for other related purposes. Could I get a motion?
So moved.
Motion made by Councilman Marr. Could I get a second?
Second.
Second made by Councilman Shepherd. Any discussion to my left? Any discussion to my right? And I'm just going to add that this was a $10 million grant that the city manager worked on putting together. Matching funds was $1 million.
Finley,
Yes.
Moran,
Yes.
Shepherd,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Marr,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes. Action agenda item number 2, 2021-236. Could I get a motion for discussion to amend the advertisement for request for qualifications for engineering services, master service agreement, and other federally funded projects to include a contracted city engineer?
Move.
Motion made by Councilman Finley. Could I get a second?
Second.
Second made by Councilman Marr. And do we want to start with Councilman Finley? Any discussion to my right? No. Any discussion to my left? Okay, well, I guess I have discussion. So we're moving on discussion on this. We didn't have actually the advertisement in the packet for us to read.
So the intention here is to basically, in one advertisement, be going, that way the engineer firms just have to put together one package. But at present, we're looking at master service agreements and then pre-qualifying for the federal funds such as GOMESA and the federal funds that will come through the rescue funds. At the same time, what we're asking is, could we consider looking at or adding to that, amending that advertisement just to read, looking at a city engineer or basically an engineering firm on retainer as part of that advertisement.
And I'd like to see the advertisement actually written out so we can read it before we vote on it, because then you bring up different different discussion items. Does the city engineer, then is he disqualified from working on any other projects within the city? Then we have discussions like that. And this has come from me sitting in an office for 40 years and hearing. So I'd like to see it written before we vote on it. Can we have something like by Tuesday's meeting so we can read?
Absolutely.
And then we know what direction we're going in?
Yep.
Right, and then she just laid everything out there. I personally would love to see, having someone on retainer where it's instant or as close to instant as you can get. But yeah, the wording's got to be laid out. It's got to be, the parameters have to be set.
So do we table this then?
We just move for discussion, so we can move to table it till the next meeting if you'd like to so choose to do that, Councilman Marr.
Sure, I move to table this till our next meeting.
Can I get a second on a motion to table? Second made by Councilman Clark. All in favor? Aye. And now moving on to the FY22 budget workshop. Continuation from our last meeting, we had a few discussion items. I know one was, well, there were several things, but one was looking at staffing for the building department. So you had sent us an email. Do you want to go over and we'll just follow suit?
If you don't mind, that'd be
Go,
perfect.
please do.
So hopefully, what I've tried to do tonight, and really I thank Kathy, because she really did it, and she and I met and kind of said, all right, here's what the council said at the last meeting. How do we incorporate that into a revised budget from last week to this week? So some of the comments y'all provided to us was A, add more police officers, B, add 2 more employees or so in public works, 3, hire the second building inspector for an entire year, not half of the year, as we had originally proposed. Adjust the mayor's salary for donations to charities. There was also discussion about having a contract to dig ditches. And so I'm going to start with that one. We have 82 miles of streets in the city. They have ditches on 2 sides of the streets, and then we have ditches behind houses and streams and everything else. So we're talking about 200 miles of ditches or so, some larger than others. And talking to someone, they just basically said, if you look at $2 a mile, you're kind of looking at about $2 million project. The budget for the Public Works Department is $1.9 million. So feasibility of it is probably not there. However, looking at the idea of maybe saying, all right, well, what about the big ditches? What about,
The
maybe
outfalls is
the
where we need to
outfalls,
start. We need to start
yeah.
at the outfalls and
So
work
that's-
our way back.
And then my thought process would just be use the existing budget, but looking at that possibility of trying to get ahead on outfalls annually, especially before hurricane season, things like that, of looking at have that contracted. But as for just over the whole city ditch digging, just the financial impact would be significant. So that's what we kind of discussed. Those are my notes from the last meeting. Okay, so the first thing we did, if we look at revenues on page 6. That y'all had given, basically we didn't add the revenue that would be coming from the lease agreement of $100,000 for the equipment purchase. So we had to add in $100,000. It washes out on the expense side, so it's a net zero. But that in the budget, we just didn't have that thing. We had the actual payments on the lease, but not that piece. So we added $100,000 to page 6 on lease agreement. Under expenses legislatively, since we had some things going up, we had to look at some things coming down. So if we're adding cost, we had to trim some cost. So the things we started with was reducing travel for legislation. We had thrown $4,000 in for extra travel. We did the same thing in administration in case we wanted to go to Jackson or DC for trying to campaign for some funding. That was some quick areas that we can grab, $8,000. So $4,000 out of legislative for general travel. We had made the adjustment on the mayor's salary of $4,800 down, and then offset that with the increase in the donations or allocations as requested. Note on page 8 is the court department. We had no changes, and otherwise everything stayed the same in legislation. Okay. No changes to court. Administration is on page 11. Again, I'd already mentioned that we reduced travel by $4,000. We did increase promotions by $500 for the dog park day. We'd committed to kind of doing that annually. We missed it on ours, so we dropped that back in. And also, you'll see the $4,800 from the mayor's contribution into allocation under administration. And again, that's the only change compared to last week.
Is it too late to change the MML nights that we're staying in Biloxi? To reduce it instead of being, I'm
Totally
just
up to you
thinking
guys.
of myself, instead of, I know Tuesday night, but,
If you just email in the morning, I think you can make changes up until
okay,
the day before arrival, so,
all right,
email us tomorrow, let us know.
thank you.
I'll move on to police, and that's page 18. And I'd sent y'all kind of a detailed email on this. I had a conversation Wednesday morning with AJ and communicated to him what the council had kind of said to me on the idea of adding more officers. And I think AJ is here, right? Yep, good. And basically through the communication was, Mike, if we just had some more funding basically in the interlocal agreement, so he had more flexibility, he would be able to basically direct extra officers during key shift times. It gives officers a little bit more overtime and more flexibility for what they want to do. We ultimately get more officers on the street too. So that was a request from our police chief, and that's at $20,000. I will note, if we look to hire an officer, we're probably looking at $50,000 for salaries and benefits. Then we got to get a car, a gun, bulletproof vest, all the other stuff that comes with it. So again, this was what AJ had communicated to me, and he's here, and my communication to him is, if we ever have to show up and go to a fight, I want to make sure we win. I don't want to put our officers in danger in any way, shape, or form. And he said, without a doubt, this would, again, this would be sufficient for what they need.
And this is a brilliant idea doing this, because this also allows our current officers to be able to have a chance to make a little bit more with the overtime. And it reduces the expenses to the residents on buying all the equipment to get someone new. So, and we have enough time in there for whenever, something happens and we have two of them that have to go to one thing, and then we can call and get another one, and we have that flexibility.
Yes. And again, he's behind me, so
Yeah,
shake yes, if you would like.
Please do.
really a good, just a perfect give and take here. Bravo to you both. That's what we're here for.
All right, this is the first time I've addressed the council. I'm not used to public speaking, but I'm going to do it anyway. What I've spoken with Mike about is it's a plan to try to reduce any kind of cost increasing to the city. The pay has been consistently going up each year as a 3% raise, and we expect that it may continue in the future as other departments increase as well around us. So when we look at the possibility of an officer making $36,000 to $38,000 a year, you also have to consider the cost of the health insurance, the PERS, workers' comp insurance. And as they make more overtime as well, that also increases. So, like you said, looking at 50, maybe even 55 to 60,000 in the future, depending on what the raises are going to be in the future. Then you have to buy a car. Then you have to buy all the equipment. You're looking at just one officer could possibly be an increase of 75 to 80, 90,000 for just the first year of doing that because of the equipment. We believe in doing this. It's $20,000 to the budget for giving these officers opportunity for overtime. It's not going to be big, long shifts for them, but it will give us coverage during key hours. There are always going to be times where we are going to get the speeding complaints regardless we have 10 officers or 3 officers. And also the types of calls, the domestic violence, as we talked about last week. There'll be times where we might get a domestic violence call or any other call that requires 2 officers. It's not just domestic violence calls, that would require it. It's anything that an officer should suspect their safety should be a concern. 2 officers should go. And if we have 3 of them are going to go. But that third person during those key hours probably won't be an everyday thing because the 20,000 only goes so far. Because we have to look at what are the increases going to be to their to their retirement as well as everything else. So it's something that we'll sit down, we'll go over, and we can add to certain days, try to narrow it down. The speeders are coming through every day. It's just the matter of the fact. But we might be able to get officer out 3-4 days a week between the hours of, well, I'm not going to say it publicly because I don't want people to know. But usually maybe 6 to 8 hour blocks, and that's going to give these officers overtime opportunities. It does make them happier, you know. And that's really all I have.
Is the $20,000, is that sufficient enough to make an impact?
Anything at this point with the rise in calls that we do have will make an impact. I'm grateful for the 20,000. Any considerations for more money is, you know, great. However, we are satisfied with that.
How much do you want?
Exactly.
Just throw that down right there.
As
Don't
much
ask
as you
that
want to give
question.
me.
You don't ask
We
that
will
question
cut
in the
somewhere
budget
else.
process.
We will cut.
As much as you want to give me. However, you know, our interlocal agreement does have an overtime budget in it already. So this is just an addition to that. So, you know, I keep an eye on this kind of thing. You know, this year has been brutal for us because of Hurricane Zeta, where I had to require officers to be on call, and by FLSA standards, I have to compensate them appropriately. We also had a lot of instances where we have these COVID scares, you know, on top of, you know, vacations. Every COVID scare is a vacation, technically, because now we're having an officer work overtime for a 10 to 14-day period where the officer would normally get his normal time. However, he has leave time, we pay him for that. So the overtime comes into the other officer covering the shifts. We've had several occasions with that. There was a point in time where I believe we were going to come up over on our interlocal agreement this year. However, due to things and factors, I think we'll come in right there. Last year, we did save about $3,000. We were in the green. So we were doing a good job of managing that budget.
Well, you do a good job.
Thank you.
You do an excellent job. We back you.
Thank you.
So if we see later on, we can make a budget amendment. We'll skinny up somewhere else.
All right. I appreciate
Appreciate the
Thank
job you
you.
guys do.
Thank you.
So just continuing on, under police, we did add just $250 under the capital outlay. That was to make sure we had solar radar signs for the speed compared to just the battery-powered one. So we trued up to the right number. There has been discussion both at the county level and locally, and I've talked to Alan, talked to Nancy before about just the idea of having animal control in the city. Bay St. Louis and Waveland both have animal control, meaning an officer who's dedicated for that. Both cities are paying close to $50,000 for that position. I know AJ has attended multiple meetings. I'm glad he's here, and we've had this discussion on is it needed or not. I think last year the number was somewhere in the 74 animals that were
dogs.
collected the whole entire year. So again, if you've got dollars to spend, is it better to have a true officer or an animal control officer? Right now we do not have that in the budget. Okay, and in talking to AJ, it wasn't really a recommendation from him. And again, he's here. He can say otherwise if you'd like.
The numbers are just not there. But you want to come
So
back? 'Cause
I asked
we've had
Waveland, Bay St. Louis,
discussions.
they work basically an 8 to 5 job, no weekends. If they get called out, ask them how they handle if they're on vacation, sick leave, that kind of thing.
You got to think
But-
of how Waveland's originated too.
Yeah.
They had
think,
their own animal shelter.
The county had an interest, I think, Mayor DePrio, what was the number for the county last year, dogs picked up?
Oh, like 780, don't quote me, remember? And so Bay St. Louis and Waveland had larger numbers, but
They had larger
Diamondhead
numbers.
has a,
But the
Yeah.
county would be picking up Diamondheads, and I think they were just looking to cut off that loose end of 74, 75, somewhere around there. And you say that it's not necessary, though.
Well, I mean, it's ultimately up to the city if they want to pay for an additional officer, the costs that it would take to cover the weekends and a 2-week period that the animal control officer with the sheriff's office would be on call. I mean, that's really where the gaps are and where the complaints are coming from. It's a 2-week period where that person is entitled to vacation or any time they might be sick, as well as weekends. There were times in the past when I was a patrolman years ago that the different cities in the county, they rotated call. However, I'm not involved in that process anymore. It's been a long time since I've been a patrolman, so I'm not familiar with exactly how they do it, but I don't believe that they're on call. When it comes to an aggressive animal, we will deal with it as the police, how we need to deal with it. So anytime that there's a loose animal, it's just a loose animal. A lot of times I had an instance a couple weeks ago where it seemed to be a friendly animal, and I put it in my backyard until I could find the owner. A lot of people do that in Diamondhead. So it's really the everybody involved in what do you want to spend for covering for these weekends and the 2 week or 3 week period during the year, because the numbers are at 74. And we work diligently with the ASPCA of Diamondhead to do everything we can to help out. However, there are times that we cannot just drop everything that we're doing to deal with the loose animals when they're not a threat to public safety.
High priority.
That's what we have to look at.
Not a high priority at the moment.
Right. If it's aggressive animal, then it becomes a threat to public safety, and we have to address it. However, most of these times they're not. And we also have people who will call and say, there's an aggressive animal. Well, there's a lot of aggressive animals, a lot of aggressive squirrels. There are aggressive chihuahuas where we get the calls on. But is it a dangerous, aggressive animal?
Right. But
that's what we have to look at. And we respond, and we make the determination from that point.
But looking at what we've accomplished in those meetings, we have accomplished a lot in those meetings.
I believe so.
I think we have, because we learned a lot. So then you mentioned about once the animal control officer gets in compliance, that we can write citations. So
Well,
these
that
74.
would be something that the animal control needs to work under the direct supervision of whoever commands them.
Right.
Unfortunately, I don't command the animal control, so I don't have control over that
And we can
aspect.
work with the person that does that. But
Correct.
these 74 dogs, if any of those are repeat offenders, then at some point we can start writing citations, and that'll get our 74 down to 35, we hope.
Right, and
That'll make
there
people
are times
realize.
that people just know the dog. I see it on Facebook all the time. Oh, old Toby got out again. It's posted on Facebook, and people forget the owner, but they remember the dog.
And then another thing we did was getting the chip reader so that the SPCA can have the chip reader on hand. And when we get the dog park
Right.
built, the chip reader will be at the dog park, so we'll have many hands being able to access it and scan the dog and see where it belongs.
Right, and the
But people
problem-
need to go put that chip in their dog for $20 on Saturday.
The problem with the chip reader sometimes is it's not mandated for them to update the information if the dog changes hands or they change address. So you could get that information, and it's a wild goose chase all day trying to locate someone. There are things to consider, but overall, I don't want to make a recommendation, say this is not warranted. However, it's up to the governing body to make a determination if this 2 week period and the weekends, 52 weekends a year, would warrant the expense.
I think if we had 50,000, we would be giving it to the police department. That's just my thought. But I mean, we are funding the SPCA. We're giving $800 a month. I'm making a donation as well. So we should have the weekends and the afternoons, and that only happened.
And that's another thing to consider. I mean, the nights are not covered anytime.
Mm-hmm.
The animal control works during the day, during the week. So the nights are not covered, the weekends are not covered. But, I believe, we do receive the complaints from the ASPCA the times that we do have these issues. However, it's not overwhelming either. You don't get an overwhelming amount of complaints from the ASPCA. They're nice people and do a lot of good work.
And they work hard. Well, thank you, Captain Gambino. That was very enlightening. We needed that. Thank you.
So again, I just wanted to bring that up. That was a conversation we had had. But again, it's not in the budget. Just, again, wanted to make sure we cover that. On page 21, you deal with the building department. This has several kind of items, and again, I emailed you guys on this specific area here. We did increase the salary expense by $17,500 to allow, number one, a higher salary for a hire at that position to try to get someone experienced. And the second one is, instead of a half a year, going to a third of the, 3/4 of the year. So a January 2022 hire compared to October of this year. And again, it's a fourth of the year off compared to a half a year. That's our recommendation. Again, I'm talking with the building official. We are actively trying to fill the position of development coordinator, planning and zoning. So we'd have some training there for that person for the next 6 months before we'd have someone else come on board.
Mike, can I ask you something that I was kicking around? When I was doing active real estate sales, we had a lot of building inspectors from different cities that were former general contractors. And it seems to me that I know a great deal of general contractors that are doing their own thing, but wouldn't mind working like 2 days a week doing inspection for another city that they're not building in. Would that be a possibility to get more inspectors without having them on full-time for a salaried position, but that we could have more buildings being inspected on a regular basis?
I think that would definitely be a consideration to have I'm going to call it a part-time inspector. We've had that before with, what's the gentleman's name before I got here? Bill Racy. So the answer would be yes. In my correspondence to y'all Friday, was also looking to see is what's the future of the building department. At some point, Ron's going to retire. So I've got to be thinking who's going to be stepping into that role at some point in the future. Is it a part-time person, full-time person? But the skill level of a contractor obviously would be ideal.
The question is, for the workload, would a part-time be more beneficial to us?
I mean, you could have two part-timers filling in one full-time, equivalent type of deal. But again, then you avoid health insurance and other expenses that come with a full-time person. But the bigger picture is just me looking down the road a year and a half from now of looking for a major position.
That's definitely.
And we've got him at a discount because, compared to what the market pays.
And I feel today, because I see what goes on in the building department, I would like to start the fiscal year out October 1, having the budget ready to hire somebody to assist in the building department, because I see where we are. It's impossible for two people to handle what we have. It's impossible. And they're good. They're very good. And they work very hard. But, we're putting unrealistic goals on them. They can't go out every day and check and make sure the silt fences are up. So we get the emails on the silt fences are down, or the rain comes and all the clay's in the ditches. And it's going to cost us a lot more at the end of the day not to have that another person October 1st than it is to wait, because we're going to have to clean the ditches out, and they're filling up from the red clay being in the ditches, and it's just too much for two people to look at. Just the 20,000 square foot medical facility, that takes very qualified inspector there. That's, and I know they're working hard to do that because that's specialties like no other. But then you've got all the home permits going on, and then we've got the 200 about to start, and we got the 76. We need somebody like tomorrow.
Again, Kathy, do you remember about a fourth of the year for that was 10 to 15?
We increased it in total to include health insurance that marketplace. And it is similar, it would be another 20,000
For a fourth of the year.
for the additional 40.
So the total cost for the entire year would be?
We have the salary set at $50,000
Okay.
But then with the benefits,
plus benefits.
security and matching, everything else, retirement, would be close to 20,000.
50,000 is up there on a building inspector, so you're trying to get somebody very seasoned.
Someone, ideally, at least having the capacity that if there's somebody that would show their face, that we could be looking to train them for a year and have it
So-
ready before Ron would retire.
Let's look at the coordinator for the planning and zoning, because I see you're wanting to move on that quicker, and we've done without one all this time, so I'm leaning more toward the building department, expedite it, but.
The problem there is I have the code enforcement guy doing the planning and zoning stuff, and he's ready to
And there's no other.
discharge those duties.
He has to type
been
the
filled in.
agendas and put that,
He's
so
doing
it's
all of
one
it.
meeting a month.
Mhm.
So, and there's nobody else that can fill in and help, and I think Catherine takes a lunch break. Is that necessary, honey? I'm kidding. So, I mean, my thought on that is, and I know that's extra work, typing the agenda and getting all of that together.
Well, it's prepping the advertisements, it's sending out notices to
It
the
is.
200 feet around, it's meeting with the people. I mean, it's a significant position.
And we can't give an incentive to our compliance officer because he works very hard doing what he does. He's doing, would he be interested in a small or some type of?
Pat wants to be part-time. And he was hired to work 20 hours a week to do code enforcement.
That's a shame,
And
and he does such a good job.
In January, when,
Mhm.
with COVID and everything else, especially with things going on in the building department, he stepped up, and all of them did, to take on additional duties, and that hasn't been released yet.
And it's,
But I have had, I said, he's not interested in full-time. His intention was, he said he would do what he's got to do to help, but his intention is to remain part-time.
I just don't see the planning and zoning development coordinator a full-time job. That's, because we've got a part-time person doing it now, and it's one meeting a month. That's my thoughts on it. I don't know if we can't get the building inspector to, and I'm not saying how to do what you're doing, but we need help in the building department. Really, we need it.
And that's why, the development coordinator, planning and zoning, which, again, Bay St. Louis just had someone retire. That was their full-time position. They just replaced somebody full-time for that role.
But we've been having it with no issues with the compliance officer part-time doing it. I guess my point is, we don't have that much on the planning and zoning agendas. There's probably 3 items or 2, we don't have a big once a month. And this is just my personal opinion. I would rather see it spent in the building department, and maybe see if we can't utilize some other staff to assist with helping with this, or maybe the new building inspector can help some as well. Between all the building inspectors, maybe because they are more knowledgeable about this. They know beyond a shadow of a doubt, looking at this, what the rules are and the laws are. It's what they do every day.
Well, a lot of it is dealing with just zoning and dealing
Right.
with if someone wants a variance because they'd like their fence at 8 foot instead of 10 feet or 20 feet or whatever feet. And then going out and meeting with the resident. So it's not just that one thing. At the same time, we've also had, 50 houses under construction right now. And it's been that way consistently. I've given reports and said, this is what the trajectory has been with construction over the last 3 or 4 years. And it doesn't seem to be slowing down. We have, more subdivisions coming on. So that's why I think having the building inspector is critical.
It's critical tomorrow.
How much time a week does Pat spend on planning and zoning? Just can he give me an
His
idea?
hours right now are about 30 hours a week, is what he's averaging.
But he does compliance.
If you looked at the number of code enforcements that he sent out last month, it's a juggle.
He probably, I know of 10 a week.
And
he
the
does
code enforcements keep coming.
Yeah.
I got one, I think, yesterday and today, 2 more, boom. And we've got to reply to it. And that's why we created the position, is to make sure we maintain the beauty in this community. And if we get people who, they don't want to maintain their lot or whatever, that we respond. And we hold them accountable.
Can we look for a building inspector that could help with the planning and zoning? Because that's their, they know the laws.
Again, this was my conversation with the building official. And what he had requested, and again, he also requested another building inspector. He said, look at the numbers, you're going to need this.
I don't know how they do what they do.
He carries a lot of hats. I mean, Ron is a talented person.
He is.
And it's going to be very difficult to fill the shoes type of thing. And that's one of the things I wanted just to kind of tee up to y'all is I'm thinking a year and a half out. You know, so if the council would rather see a building inspector, then so be it. That's where we'll go. You know, we can keep the salary wherever and shift, and we make a position to hire this person before that person. You know, I'll take direction. You know.
What was the total cost for the P&Z coordinator with benefits for a year?
We had that at an estimate 40, 45. And again, that doesn't mean that's the offer, it's just what's there budgeted. So, you know, depends who you get.
How many homes do we have under construction right now?
It's about
Right now?
50.
About 50?
Yeah, somewhere in that neighborhood.
That's like already started, or is that just?
Oh, permit pulled, yeah.
Permit pulled? Okay.
That's a lot of work.
It's a lot of inspections. I mean, I sent that report out, I don't know, now it's been even 2 months ago, that Ron had given me just to kind of tee up the conversation of, hey, you know, this is a lot of inspections.
But then, and then you got to think of the commercial areas as well. So we have those to inspect as well. So,
And the kicker, I mean, the other piece about it, you know, I mean, I'm not going to be surprised if we got more announcements on commercial development in the near future, you know. And we're pushing on like a town center, and we're pushing East Aloha. So, you know, the idea of mixed use or buildings, office buildings, I mean, all that's coming down the pipe. So to be staffed appropriately and with trained people is important.
What is the response back? Haven't you been looking for inspectors in the past and had very poor response for employment?
We have not been advertising recently for inspector. We hired Bo maybe a year plus ago. And then we've been actively pushing on the development coordinator position.
On average right now, how long is it taking from the time a contractor pulls a permit to completion?
I think it's going to be the developer.
Right.
We have some that want to be
Some
done in
6 months,
60 days.
Yeah.
Is that one person's goal?
On the rain, too.
And then there's others that have been out there probably a year.
it's
So
just
I really
too,
can't speak knowledgeable
Average is
to it.
3 to 6 months, I would think, on an average construction.
Yeah, I mean, at lunch today, I asked a guy who built his own house in the back of Diamondhead, I said, how long did it take you to build your house? He was about 10 months. He did some construction himself. He owns,
but
you
the
know,
builders that we
80
have
acres
that
or
are
something out
moving,
there.
they're 3 months. They're done. They're
What's that?
we got most of the builders we have in here are 3 months, and you've got to be ready to hop and move. That's just
And
my
again,
opinion. I'm just not going.
I will compliment building. I mean, I don't get a complaint that inspections are not being done.
No,
That's not a call that comes in.
we get the complaints that we need to follow up on the silt fence, the clay in the
bet.
ditches, and then it costs us money to go dig the ditches out, you know, and we would save a lot more than 50,000 having an extra eye out there on the ground watching the builders. That's all I'm gonna say.
I agree with the rate of building, that having more home inspectors now would be, I think, prudent for the city. I also think, going back to last week when I said I still don't agree with the 500,000 budgeted for the conversion of the building and new thing, is why not use and allocate some of that money to hire an inspector instead of trying to like do figures here with reducing this one to do that. Take some of the money out of that 500,000 and see what you can do, just making part of the activity center more room for the inspectors to be working out of, you know, while the next year comes along, you know, and see how that works out, instead of putting in our money in a capital improvement project now, when I think there's more important things with drainage and all like that to be looked at, instead of focusing on redoing the building department's actual office space.
Yeah. I mean, right now, if you go in Ron's office without another building inspector or without another planning and zoning person, they are exploding. So, I mean, we have discussed relocating them inside of this hall, pushing them to the end, pulling out the conference room and sticking them in there and just storage the conference tables. There was some discussion about activity center and converting that to a counter space, but Opportunity costs. Is it worthwhile having an activity center where you can have coffee and donuts and board meetings and things, or compared to having a building department in there? I mean, you can easily build a counter for cheap overall. One thing I've tried to do with the budget is operationally, salaries, benefits, supplies, utilities, we stay within the millage that we collect. The stuff we go outside of is, over the years, we've surplused a bunch of money, and I kind of go into that to say, all right, well, that's the matching funds or capital projects, acquiring land for drainage. But for an operations that I don't want to present a budget that's in the red because we're paying a salary or buying supplies. And so that's why we've kind of cut 4,000 here and 4,000 there to keep us, and the net increase after all this was $189 was the change after we make everything that we've done thus far. But again, the council will direct that. I mean, if y'all want to hold on that, we're not there yet, but that's ultimately the council's decision on pulling the trigger there or not.
I think the conference room has probably been axed. I mean, you can't even hire this one person without having a place to put them. You've got 3 people in one office. So, I mean, the conference room is probably going to be gone just for you to get past this next year. We're going to have to look at something for the building department because we're not very efficient.
The discussion is the two, or at least my eyeball is looking at the 2 offices on the end. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's got real estate. It's got land, let's call it, square footage.
I think if we're gonna hire people, though, we have to put them in reasonable accommodations so that they're happy working here. I mean, the last thing we wanna do is train somebody in the building department and have them so miserable because they're jammed up in, or sharing an office that there's no room to work in, and losing them to somewhere else. I think we have to be smart about that. I know how cramped they are in there. I mean, they're between drawings and desk and everything. There's a small path to walk around. That's about it. So I think I agree with that. You know, I mean, the $500,000, that's not a permanent stream of revenue, so it doesn't answer the salary issue for someone for a very long time. We have to be able to budget that into revenue that we know that's going to be a constant stream.
Agreed.
And I agree with that, and that's why I think we need to move on the building inspector for the entire year. And if the planning and zoning coordinator, you know, we have to wait and see where we are halfway through the year, then we just continue on. But that's just my thoughts.
But I also agree with that number, because I like you said, I agree 100% that we need to find the future. We need to find somebody to fill those very big shoes that Ron Jones is going to leave behind. So I think that's important, getting the right candidate, and it's going to cost us some money.
The way I look at it, $40,000 a year for a salary, it's nothing these days to me. I just don't think that's going to be. You have to. If you want somebody good, you're going to pay for what you get.
Yeah, I'm just trying to manage that bottom line.
Understood.
I understand.
That's why we get other people working on P&Z. We should be good. We'll all donate a few hours to.
I think Jeannie's got a couple more hours in the day.
I think I saw her.
Thank you, Jeannie.
So what I'm hearing is we'd like to see possible increase in salary in the building department, but especially trying to move first for building inspector before planning and zoning.
I
Is that the
think that's
direction
what
I'm
you
hearing?
heard.
We need to have somebody qualified to carry the football. A year from now, or a year and a half, whenever that time is, I think somebody needs to be acclimated to the Diamondhead way, and look, Ron's super talented, and look, hopefully Ron stays another 3 years. I don't know, but we definitely need to have somebody who's ready to go at that
I think
time.
he's ready to go hunting.
Well, especially if there's just going to be one. If there's 2, then they can platoon. But if there's just one person just dropped into the fire, that's going to be a hot fire.
Yeah. And Mike, have you done some market research on what somebody that's running a building department, comparable city is getting paid?
We just interviewed somebody for development coordinator that asked for an $80,000 salary.
What?
Hey, but I'm worth it.
Now, I can tell you, Bay St. Louis and all are not paying $80,000 for that position.
I agree.
But that was for that role. If you get into Gulfport, Biloxi, or the bigger cities, I mean, they're going to be able to afford and pay And it's got a bigger responsibility, bigger territory.
And their sales tax revenue's $1 million a month.
we do-
You know, we're not
Right.
playing
Yep.
with the same.
When we look at salaries, we do an annual and kind of look at position and look at Ocean Springs, Pascagoula, Bay St. Louis, Waveland, and say, what's the building official making? And then what are the responsibilities? You know, is the judge getting health insurance or not? Those are all things we look at.
And we had that study done on that. We have that. You might want to share that with the council.
Yeah.
Okay.
We pretty much end up writing about the middle
Right. Yeah, you know, like I was saying, you know, I don't want to overpay for somebody, but I want to make sure that we give a competitive rate that
I
we can
think we
keep
need to
that
be
person.
prepared for an increase for Ron's salary, or for whoever that role, whoever fills that seat in the future. So should I keep, let me ask you a question, should I keep that budget line item about the same and just transition who we're hiring first?
Yes.
Yes.
That way it doesn't impact the bottom line.
Yeah.
Would y'all rather that compared
Yeah.
to adding 20 grand and then trimming 20 grand somewhere else?
No,
That's what I'm hearing.
Mm-hmm.
That's
That's
correct.
what you're
Yeah,
hearing.
that makes.
Obviously, since there was a salary increase, the other personnel expenses that go with it also increased. We kind of already talked about that. So those are items you'd see on the building department, page 21. We reduced FF&E. This is non-capitalized, us buying supplies and things by 2,000. Reduced professional consulting fees by 3,000. Reduced lot cleanup by 2,000. And then we added a capital outlay for mobile equipment, which is a truck for the inspector to get around, of 23,000. The way we handled that was to shift it from the Public Works Department to the Building Department. So, you know, bottom line would be the same. What we're going to do there is in this year's budget, go back and add the Public Works truck this year with a budget amendment that we can afford. And that way it doesn't change out next year at all. And that was the building department. Thank y'all for the discussion. Public Works, this page 25, this is our largest department, obviously. We had left a little fluff in there on salary by 5,000. We kind of trimmed that down a little bit. We decreased professional fees, consulting by 6,600. Decreased professional fees by engineering by 3,000. Decreased paving by 10,000. Increased capital outlay mobile equipment by 77,000. That was the purchase of the truck to offset the revenue from the lease agreement. That was the net that we did. So we removed the truck for building department and put in a dump truck. So the net is 77. And that's the building Public Works. No questions? Economic Development's page 30. We just decreased professional fees, consulting in there by $2,000. Again, we were looking for little dollars that we can kind of get back to the bottom line. On page 42, we added a Go Mesa fund. So we did get notice from DMR that we did, and we already knew it because the state legislature approved it back in the spring, of a Go Mesa grant for $495,000. So we're putting that budget in. We're setting up that special fund to track it, both income and expenses. And finally, Solid Waste Fund, page 45. I'd sent an email out to the council on this, looking at, we had picked up, I think it was 236, 238 piles of shrubbery or debris using a Traco rubber tire and a small dump truck. It generally takes 3 men to go out and do that. Bay St. Louis, Waveland both own a grapple truck. Waveland's truck is often broken, as I'm told. They both have a full-time staff person, one that runs that grapple truck 24/7, 6 days, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. It takes anywhere from 5 to 7 weeks for each city to run their entire city in making the loop. Bay St. Louis charges $2 per month for the grapple truck service. That's part of their solid waste fee. Waveland does not. That's part of their general fund through Public Works. So in looking at that, it talked about trying to add staff in Public Works. If I was able to get rid of the grapple trucks service, that we would not need that extra manpower. We already are down 2 people. We just made an offer to 1 yesterday or today. And so if we can fill those 2 positions that we've been short, we feel if we didn't have the going out to pick up shrubbery and collect garbage, that they could focus on the ditch digging and the street paving and the potholes and the things that Public Works should be focused on. Again, running an exercise of waste management and getting a quote from them to just go pick up the probably 150 piles that are out there right now, a lot of it being storm-related debris. It's $175 per hour plus tipping fees, and that would just be, we would give them a list of properties, they go out, pick it up, bill us. So I just said, all right, well, if that's a going rate, what would it cost if we said twice a month, every 2 weeks, we sent a list and you went out and picked up these 30 or so properties. So it's $8. Let's say it's a full day to do each, do it 2 times a week. It would come out to about $33,000. And again, for that type of thing, we'd probably have to go into purchasing procurement processes and other stuff, but just to get a roundabout number for talk before we get into that discussion, is that something I'd want to consider?
No.
You know, because otherwise, Public Works, 3 men, and right now it's 2 and 3 days a week, which means ditch digging's not getting done.
I mean, no, in a
Okay.
sense that I said it at solid waste. I did not want no part of buying one. No, because you look at Waveland, they're behind. They're behind, how many months did they say? Trying to get limbs
Oh, they're-
picked up. So solid waste is wanting to make it as part of a bid alternate, and the bid coming up, so it'll be like a county-wide, we don't know if the county will, we know the cities want to participate, because we all think it'd be great to have this as a bid alternate. Yeah, that's where we need to move collectively as a unit.
Right, but that's a
Instead
year
of,
off. And that's where I'm at right now. And again, spring, summer is most people's cutting the trees, cleaning, so you're gonna see an increase. Whereas, November, December may be decreased that number. So again, the time would probably be less. But the impact of what it's having on Public Works, I mean, I get an email every day, because I get the info at Diamondhead that says, I got shrubbery to come pick up. I create a work request, it goes in the system, and we make a list, and then they go pick it up. And right now, we're paying for it through our general fund and using our staff that's not properly equipped to do that job. It's not a grapple truck. So I'm just wondering, as we look to this next year, up until next April, when Solid Waste makes a decision on what they're gonna do, is that something we can look to outsource?
It makes sense to me.
and remember, for a while, we stopped it until we got caught up. We stopped it for, how long did we stop it? I want to say it was a
Yeah.
year.
Yeah, we stopped for a little while, because
Yeah, we did.
they
We
have
stopped.
bulky, we pay for bulky waste through our current solid waste, through Waste Management. So you can put shrubbery out, but you gotta cut it in 4-foot sections, you gotta tie it, or you gotta put it in a can or a box or something, and they would pick that up. Anything that's just thrown on the side of the road, and if it's over 4 feet, they're not picking it up. So we sit and we look at a mattress on the side of the road, or a sofa or something. To me, that goes back to the beauty of our community. I don't like seeing a pile of shrubbery. I can't believe Bay St. Louis and Waveland are at really 5 to 7 weeks. That if someone put trash out like that, 5 to 7 weeks, to me, is not acceptable.
No, and
No,
once
I
we
think-
can get it where we bid it out and we all work collectively, the cost will be less.
Yeah, I think ideally that's the long term. I think that's gonna be my recommendation to y'all. When I emailed you the other day saying they want us to start having these discussions. We got to give them what we want. My question is, between now and April, could we look at outsourcing that and not put it on Public Works to go pick up garbage?
And if we find it's too costly, then we may have to stop like we did, and the residents were fine with that. A lot of people have landscapers. They have people that do their yards that can carry it off. I know Councilman Clark knows that as well. A lot of folks have that ability. So if we see it's a financial burden where we know we need money for the police, we know we need money for the building department, then we may have to stop until we get it where we can afford it.
Well,
And
My
that.
recommendation would be, is that you increase, if we outsourced it, that this is part of solid waste. It's part of the solid waste fee. So, if we wanted to charge $1 a month for grapple service, that would basically pay for that service. It's a $12 annual increase per household, from 142 to 154, I think was the numbers I sent to y'all.
And that would be for the solid waste board to vote when they approve if we did it now, then we'll have to pay because we have no way to bill the residents. We will have to.
No, that's not right. So we direct Jimmy Ladner on what to bill for the
And
city
we
of Diamondhead.
pay him to bill.
And we pay him
So we will
a
have
fee.
to pay him to bill for the picking up of, if we add it to the solid waste.
Instead of
well.
142, he would make a commission off of the 154. But what
And
we
he
charge
probably-
our
yeah.
people doesn't go through the solid waste authority. Okay, so they're gonna do their contract, that board will look at that next April and award it, okay, based on whatever it is, whatever we say, hey, what kind of services we wanna have. But between now and then, it's really up to the council to decide, what that fee is, and to make sure that that fund doesn't go negative. And so right
And
now,
to
we're
add
kind
it
of
to
out
the
of safe.
solid
but if-
waste bill, I think we're too late in the year to do that. People have already paid their, because we bill 3 times. They've already paid their 146, and then we'll have to ask them to, I think we're too late. Starting next year when it come in July, when the bids come in and we know where we are, and then the residents know, hey, you're gonna be paying this to rent your can and this to, for citywide pickup, then they know what they're getting. Now it'll be like we're blindsiding everybody, and I think if we can't afford
Okay,
it.
I mean, I have no problem slowing down
Mhm.
the pickup of shrubbery, but I expect your phones to ring.
Mhm.
Right.
I mean, we are stretched.
just wanted to
So
remind
we've
you
got
that-
drainage problems.
The process to increase that fee is,
We gotta
you
advertise.
advertise
It's a
public
big thing
hearings.
to do. It is.
Yeah, so it wouldn't happen,
No.
from one meeting to the next. It's like a 2.5 month process.
April
to
would be
increase
here, and
it.
we still probably wouldn't get the billing
So,
done out.
Yeah, plan accordingly.
And I see that. And if we can't afford it, then we did stop it for a year. And
Yeah, I mean, because we also, again, we pay a tipping fee. So right now, we collect all this garbage, we bring it back to Public Works, they dump it, then they go out and get more. When there's a big pile of garbage, we call Pete's. Pete's comes in, picks it all up, and drives it to King Landfill, and then we pay Pete's for that tipping fee, let's call it.
Well, I definitely don't think that the city should be picking up, when somebody's contracting landscapers and that to do work, I don't think we should pick that up. That's what I'm
Now,
trying
if someone's had a professional contractor do work in their yard,
they have to haul.
they have to haul it off.
Okay.
I agree.
Could we, like say when you send out Public Works now, are they all over the town, or is it something like we can say, hey, Ward 1, this may be your week or something to pick up stuff, Ward 2, or everything like that, or are they just going everywhere with the calls?
Well, as the emails or calls come in requesting pickup, we throw it in, make a work request, and then from there, they stack them, and then they distribute it and say, go. If they're driving down the street and they see a pile, they stop, write the address down, pick it up, and keep moving.
Do we have any idea what that costs us a year? Just that debris pickup?
I don't have a hard number on it, but I can tell you it's 3 men, a track hoe, and a small dump truck. And if they're on a busy road, they probably have another truck with them.
And that's why we stopped it a year.
Yeah.
A lot of people have landscapers.
And then we probably $5,000 in tipping fees to Pete's,
Mm-hmm.
something like that.
And it's not that we're saying if you have a landscaper, you can't do it. We're saying a lot of residents do have landscapers. And so we're different on our dynamics than maybe other cities. I don't know specifically.
I can remember when we did not pick it up.
Yes.
We had residents that called and we asked, did you have, who
Mm-hmm.
performed the work? And they'd say, well, I hired somebody. So they'd call them and they'd come back and get it.
Okay,
That
thank
did
you. That's
happen at
very
that-
clear.
yeah.
Okay.
did it myself. They always say bundle it.
Okay.
I mean,
So does
I know
that
at my house, I put a little bit in the garbage can at a time, you know, and
That's
watch it go.
generally
and-
what happens at mine.
I mean, that's the worst.
Yeah.
We can make it.
Or this past storm, because I know I had Zeta limbs that finally fell out of my tree from Claudette.
I mean, right now, we just drove the city.
No, I'm going home
I
to put 'em
drove
in the
Ward
can.
1, and Public Works drove the other 3 wards, and we're easily at 150 lots with shrubbery and debris on their property right now.
Yeah, we had even made the door hangers saying you
Mhm.
needed to clean your debris,
Mhm.
and that worked because I still have those.
City clerk is ready for her door hangers. So does this conclude the budget on the
So
items?
again, based on the
Mhm.
changes we've made thus far, and what we'll do is with solid waste, what I'm hearing from y'all is to not make a change in that area. So we will erase that change. And the net would be a $189 change to the bottom line of the general fund. And I haven't heard really any other, besides building department hiring this person before that person, financially, I haven't heard any other real changes that we're demanding or asking for.
No, we still have another meeting to just finalize. Okay.
So when we show up next Tuesday, the budget's gonna stay the same, except for, that little tweak.
Mm-hmm. I will. Thank you. I think we need to finalize because we went over a lot. Do you have something specifically?
Pretty satisfied with the way it is now. That's why I'm wondering why we need another meeting.
Because we don't have the final draft in front of us, so maybe we need, yeah, maybe we
Okay.
need to.
But I mean, that's just like minor, like 1 or 2 items.
I'm just saying, if we don't need, if we need another meeting before next Tuesday, we usually do them right before. So I think there is.
I think the 5 should be,
Can
and
it
then
be
we
part
can
of the 6 o'clock
finalize all
meeting?
these numbers and know where you are.
Have it on the calendar as a recess.
I'm just wondering if it can be part of the 6 o'clock
Regular
meeting.
meeting?
It's just a line item.
Yeah, we could do that. We'll just plan on staying a little longer instead of coming a little earlier. We're all in for that.
But
okay?
aside, I mean, from, again, changing the numbers right
Mhm.
now for Kathy and I
Mhm.
and Jeannie, the only thing I'm hearing is really the solid waste fund.
And the building department, and adding the
Well, I'm-
20,000 for the police department, and,
That's all,
already in it.
that's all
Mhm.
incorporated, but, I mean, I'm just gonna flip when we hire somebody for building, I mean, based on what I'm hearing. So
That sounds right to me.
Kathy's homework is gonna be minimal. Thank y'all.
thank you. So with that being said, if there's no further business, legal counsel, no need for executive session. Any other business to my right? Any business to my left? Could I get a motion to adjourn? Motion made by Councilman Clark. Could I get a second?
Second.
Second made by Councilman Shepherd. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all. You'll have a good night.
Thank you.